you're watching TC McCarthy, the most handsome and entertaining science fiction author on video. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Mars. And why are we going to do that? Well, because Mars plays a prominent role in my book coming up in July 2019 called Tyger Burning from Baen Books. You can pre-order Tyger Burning now. It doesn't, just because it's coming out in July 2019 doesn't mean you can't buy it now. And I did a whole video explaining why it's important. Pew pew. And if you do that, I would greatly appreciate it. Also, stay tuned for future contests and giveaways that I'll be doing later on in early 2019. Okay, back to Mars. It plays a role in my book, and it's an interesting place. It's probably the next planet. I hope it's it'll be the first planet that manned missions are sent to from Earth. But it's talked about so frequently as if it's a given that we're going to get there, and people generally don't pay attention to the potential dangers that our astronauts will face during the mission and after they get there. So I'm going to go through some of the dangers that they'll face here, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up and then send you on your way. Number 1, space sickness. Now, you may not realize it, but astronauts get sick in space. A lot of them do, even some of the more famous ones that you probably know of. When they first get launched into space, it is very disorientating. They wind up in zero gravity, and it's like being on a boat in terms of seasickness. It's a very similar sensation. You lose your orientation, everything gets turned around, you're not used to being weightless for extended periods of time, and so you tend to want to vomit and get sick, but eventually you adjust. You get your sea legs, right? You get your space legs. And then the reverse is true. Once you get back to Earth, everything seems strange for a while then as well. So it's something that you really can't escape. A few lucky ones aren't affected by it, but many astronauts are. Mental stress. Now the trip to Mars isn't going to be an overnight affair. You're going to be in a space capsule, kind of confined with people you may or may not really like. Hopefully you like them all. They will have been selected so that everybody is compatible. But you're going to spend months and months and months in that capsule, depending on when you come back, etc. You could be spending a lot of time, and then once you get onto Mars, you'll be in some sort of a habitat. And again, close proximity, right? That drives some people nuts. And so you'll kind of, people will be put under mental stress that they really hadn't anticipated or prepared for. You can do practice missions on Earth, right? Enclose a bunch of people in a small area for an extended period of time, but that's not exactly the same thing. Those people aren't also exposed to the pressures of potentially being killed at any moment by a number of different things that we'll get into later in this video. Weaker muscles. Now, as soon as you start to go into zero G, the longer you stay there, the weaker your muscles will get. They will start to atrophy. In my book, Tyger Burning, which is science fiction, I overcome this with injected drugs. And I think, just my opinion, I think the future of space travel is going to have to depend on some sort of drug that prevents this from happening. Because no matter how much you exercise in space, exercise can mitigate some of this. The fact of the matter is you start to lose bone density, your muscles start to get weak, and exercise doesn't take care of that completely. Only gravity does. So I think that in the future, we're probably going to develop some sort of drug or drug cocktail that will help to prevent this from happening in the first place. Eye problems. You might not realize it, but once you're in zero gravity, your eye changes shape. And so your muscles and your lenses in your eye get stressed. And a lot of astronauts come back and suddenly find that they need glasses when they didn't before. Medical emergencies. You break a bone, you're on your own when you're on your way to Mars. You can't go to the emergency room, right? And if something worse happens, God forbid, you're on your own again. So basically you want to hope that you're going to pick a fairly healthy set of crew members, but if something does happen, hopefully there'll be a doctor on board that can deal with most contingencies. But if it's something serious like cancer or something else that's life-threatening, there's not much that can be done for you. Now, you could, in theory, radio back and forth with surgeons and doctors for different treatments. But remember, there's like a 20-minute delay. If you're on Mars, there's a 20-minute radio delay. So it's not going to be exactly the best set of circumstances for someone trying to instruct a medical person on the planet to do some sort of procedure that he or she has never done before. Radiation. There's a lot of radiation on Earth, but once you go into space and you don't have the protection of our atmosphere and magnetosphere, you're going to get hit with charged particles, gamma rays, all sorts of things in space. And hopefully spacecraft will be designed to mitigate some of that, but you're not going to get away from it. So based on missions to Mars that carried the equivalent of dosimeters, more or less, but they weren't exactly dosimeters, missions to Mars so far have tracked and kept track of the amount of radiation that hit spacecraft on the way there and on the way back. And what researchers have concluded is that a crewed mission to Mars will be exposed to a lifetime's equivalent of radiation. So basically, these people are going to be at greater risk if they return from certain types of cancers. Meteorites. This is a problem in my book, in Tyger Burning. Meteorites are all over the place. Tiny little, fist-sized chunks of rocks that we don't even know about. And so as your spacecraft travels, there's no guarantee that something isn't going to fly in the opposite direction and punch a hole through the craft. Now, these things are probably going to be going super fast relative to the travel of the spacecraft. And so if it hits somebody, basically they could be dead instantaneously. If it doesn't hit anybody, you could potentially face rapid decompression scenarios, and you're rolling the dice. There's really very little you can do about this other than hope for the best. You can put some kinds of shields, potentially, plasma shields, other things that they've considered, but that'll only mitigate I think the smallest and tiniest kind of dust-sized particles. It's not going to deal with any big, large chunks of rock that might happen to get in your way. And this has happened in the past. It happened to Mariner 4. And Mariner 4 was knocked out just by sand-sized particles that hit at 150,000 kilometers per hour. Remember, speed matters, right? If it's not big, if it's small, but it's traveling fast enough, it's gonna have a lot of kinetic energy. And let's not forget the landing. Landings and takeoff, when it comes to aircraft, and spacecraft are no different, are the riskiest parts of any mission. And so landing on Mars with manned personnel is going to be like a new version of the moon landing. We haven't done that in decades. And so these astronauts are going to be training with new systems, thankfully better computers, but nevertheless, they're going to have to do something that we haven't done in decades. They're going to train for it for sure, but when you do it for real for the first time, that's an entirely different story. Very risky. Fingers crossed that they make it. Anyway, those are some of the dangers that people will face on manned mission to Mars. Check out my book to find out more dangers that they might face, especially in a far future setting. Actually, Tyger Burning isn't so far future, it's kind of near future. But anyway, check it out. It's released July 2019. Again, you can pre-order it. I'd really appreciate it. End transmission. Hey, TC McCarthy here, the most eclectic and entertaining science fiction author on YouTube, maybe even the internet. Thanks for watching this video. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. As usual, buy my books. I've got a new one coming out in July, and I'll have a giveaway coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. Appreciate you subscribing to my channel, and please, 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 please don't forget to click that little bell icon so that whenever I upload new content, you get notified. Thanks again. See you soon.